We're just going to give you a quick rundown of active versus passive voice, because these things will be really helpful to know when writing. So first, would you rather watch LeBron play basketball or some random person sitting in the stands? Verbs and voice. Voice is the form of a verb that takes to indicate whether the subject of the verb performs or receives the action. There are two types of voice, active voice and passive voice. That's what you need to know. Active voice. Active voice is used to show that the subject of the sentence, so the noun, is performing the action. So the noun is doing the verb. So here are some examples. LeBron threw the basketball before the buzzer. So LeBron, the subject, threw is the verb, and then what did he do? He threw the basketball. LeBron shot the basketball from the free throw line. So once again, LeBron is the subject. Shot is the verb. LeBron scored 3 points. LeBron is the subject. Scored is the verb. At no point in time during this do you have to ask who did the verb, who threw the basketball, who shot the basketball, who scored the 3 points, because you know it tells you at the very beginning that LeBron did these things. Now, passive voice is sort of putting the subject to the backside. So passive voice is used when the subject is the recipient of the action. So instead of LeBron threw the ball, it is the ball was thrown by LeBron. Instead of LeBron shot the basket, it is the basket was shot by LeBron. Or LeBron scored 3 points, it's the score was made by LeBron. So anytime where you want to have your subject at the end, if you're confused about that, it's probably passive voice. And we're going to go into first, why does it matter? Active voice is more direct and concise. And this, they're going to try to trick you up on the ACT or when you take any sort of like end of course exam. They want you to use active voice. They do not like passive voice at all. And as a writer, as someone who is writing, you want to use active voice because it's simpler. Passive voice may sound a little bit more fancy on occasion, but the simple way is normally the best way. So back to our beginning question, active voice is like watching LeBron play. Passive voice is like watching gum stuck on the bleachers in the stands. Just not as interesting. When would you want to use passive voice? So there are some times when you do want to use passive voice. A lot of times it's used by politicians. So you know that some of our former politicians have made mistakes in the past. They do not want to say, I made a mistake, because that focuses the blame solely on them. They want to take the mistake and have it be sort of separated from them. So they'll say, the mistake was made, or mistakes were made. Okay, yeah, mistakes were made, but made by who? So they want to sort of avoid that that sort of responsibility. They'll also say, to better emphasize like the main point of a sentence, children were harmed by the drunk driver. Okay, so you can say the drunk driver harmed children, but if you want to emphasize that the main point is that the children were harmed, you could put them first, and that is a little bit more of emphasizing that main message of the children that were harmed. So there are 3 different ways that you can identify what is a passive voice. Okay, so the first way is called the verb test. And this is going to be if you see a sentence that features a to be verb, so am, is, was, were, be, being, been, anything like that, that is a to be verb, and I'll post a list so that you can be familiar with them. So anything like this sentence says was, that is a to be verb. So anytime you see a sentence like this and you see a was there, or any of the to be verbs, it's probably passive. So look at our active example. Our active example is John baked the bread. He sure did. You know who baked that bread? John did, because it tells you right there. Or you can say the bread was baked by John. Now here we have was, that is our to be verb. And you're saying the bread was baked by John. Now that is pretty fancy if it was like really special bread and you're like, oh, you want to emphasize the bread. You don't want to emphasize the bread. You want to emphasize John who did the baking because John deserves his kudos. Okay, so that is your first test, is the verb test. And this sentence definitely fails it because it says was. And here are some other, here are the to be verbs. Some that right there, I'll post a total list for you separately. So some of those verbs are am, is, are, was, were, be, being, been. So if you see any of them, they're called linking verbs. So if you see any of those, then just think twice. That is the verb test. Here are some more examples. Is being kicked, had been kicked, was being kicked. Here are some more examples. The cookies were eaten by the children. Okay. At our house, we just say the cookies were eaten. We don't try to say who ate them. You say they were eaten. They didn't get eaten by themselves. Someone did them. So that is passive because you see that were. Ooh. Were. That's not good. You want to have your subject first. Your subject is always going to do the action, okay? We want that active voice. Okay, that's what we're working with. The subject is going to do the verb, okay? So the children ate the cookies. Yeah, they did. The children ate the cookies. The children did this thing. So that is talking about agency, right? You want to know who did this thing. It is agency, it is responsibility, it is accountability. So this is the second one. It's called the agency test. You need to know who did this thing. So it would really help to find your verb. Okay, so in the children ate the cookies, you know that ate is the verb. Well, who ate the cookies? The children did. The next one, the tunnels are dug by the gophers. Okay, so your verb right there is dug. Okay, the tunnels are dug. Okay, but if you go to active, then you know immediately who did this thing. The gophers dug the tunnels. Try to put your subjects first. This is all about taking the agency test. So you want to put the subject first. The subject before the verb. The gophers dug the tunnels. You know that. So they are actually doing the subject. We're going to go back up here and we're going to talk about something else, and it is called the zombie test. And that is the third way that you identify subject or passive or active voice. Find the slide. We'll use these sentences because we're here. Okay, so number 3 is the zombie test. So if you have a sentence like the tunnels are dug by the gophers, so even if you're just looking at this, you know that the gophers did do the digging. It's not as immediately obvious as in the active voice, but a good way to tell if something is positive or passive or active is by taking out this last bit right here. Take out the subject, okay? Can you take out by the gophers, okay? Whatever is at the end. If you can say the tunnels are dug by, and then you can say zombies, then it is passive, okay? The tunnels are dug by zombies. If you can replace the gophers, or if you can replace the subject with zombies and have the sentence make sense, then it's passive. Here, let's do this one. The cookies were eaten. Instead of saying you're taking out the children, you're saying, because they're the subject, the cookies were eaten by zombies. If you can replace the subject with the word zombies and still have it make sense, it is passive voice. That is your third way. So let's do this little activity together. And I want you to tell me if the sentence is active or passive, and we'll go through them all together. So, Louise made the chocolate cake. Okay, so we know who our subject is immediately, Louise. What did she do? She made the chocolate cake. There we go. So it is active because we automatically know our subject. Our subject is followed by a verb. Number 2, the chocolate cake was made by Louise. Ooh, hoo, hoo. What is here? Was. Was is a to-be verb and it is on the no-no list. So this is passive. You could change it to number 1 and it would make sense. Okay? And then you could say, the package was advertised by the travel agent. So let's do our zombie test here. So we know that the travel agent is our subject because she is doing the advertising for the package. So if you take out the travel agent and replaced it with zombies, it would read, the package was advertised by the zombies. Now, technically, that's correct. You can say that. But that is how you know that it is passive. This is a passive sentence. The next one, the travel agent advertised the package. Okay, you have our subject. Our subject did the verb, which is advertised. The subject and the verb. So this is active. The chain was broken by my brother. Now that to me sounds like the brother is not taking responsibility for his actions. Okay. Now in any other household, people would say, my brother broke the chain. Because you want people to know who did that. So, and here we have our was. That is failing the verb test. So it is passive voice. And we want to directly place the blame on the brother, which goes back to agency, like who did this thing. So my brother, brother broke the chain on my bike. So the brother is doing the action, and there we go. If you need me to do the rest of them, just let me know. But I think you all have the point, and I'm going to post a review sheet on here for you, just briefly going over. I'll take these and put them in a Word doc and talk about all of our tests. But just remember that if you are trying to decide if something is active or passive, number 1, you're going to look at the verb. If you see a to-be verb anywhere in that sentence, think twice. Number 2 is the agency test. Who is doing the verb? Okay, you need to know immediately that Louise made the chocolate cake. You need to know immediately who the subject is and what they did. Immediately at the beginning of the sentence. And number 3, if you have a passive sentence and you can replace the subject with the word zombies and have that sentence still make sense, then it is passive. Okay. I hope that made sense, and we're going to set you up a little review sheet so you can study it closely, and I hope that when I see your writing skills that I see no passive voice.